A very good evening to everyone who is currently watching this talk and who will be watching this talk in the future. One of our favorite topic at Ungender right now, which we have undertaken under our conversation with leaders, is of course keeping the theme of gender intact here and now focusing our lens or limelight on the VC ecosystem. Um, I myself have been part of the startup ecosystem for almost more than a decade now, and just not only with myself, but also with fellow entrepreneurs and people within as well as outside the industry. Whenever we talk about this ecosystem, we see this prominent discussion need on the lack of gender diversity. There are various reasons for it, of course. It could be contributed to the society, it could be contributed to just how family setups are, it could be contributed to purely actually a specific gender not being good at running business. We don't know yet. We have not concluded it yet. But today in this conversation, we are so glad that Triyansha has agreed to join us. Triyansha Vijayvargiya has agreed to join us for this very important conversation, something very close to ungender. Triyansha is working with the Chiratae Ventures, part of their investment team. And I'm so glad, Triyansha, once again, that you have agreed to talk about it and share some insights of your own, when it comes to looking at the VC ecosystem from this gender lens. So on behalf of Ungender, a very warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Pallavi. I'm super excited to be here.
No, thank you. I'll jump straight into it, Triyansha. I'm sure you're also not untouched and left, ignorant of the conversation whenever we say startup ecosystem and gender and funding and all these associated words just go hand in hand. There have been a lot of conversation on this in different contexts, right? Do we need more women? Do we need more? And here, when we talk about gender, for the sake of keeping it dedicated, I'm not even going beyond binary right now, but purely on the need of gender inclusion from a cis woman perspective. What is your take on this? It's do you believe from where you are, especially being part of this industry, is this something even worthy of talking about? And what has got this conviction that yes, it is?
No, absolutely. I think I wouldn't even peg it at being just worthy to be talked about. I think it's important to have an active conversation about topics around culture, around diversity and inclusion, both at the workplace level and specifically pointing out the startup ecosystem over here. And just to highlight a statistic here, I think Enlightenment pointed out this in their study in one of the articles, was that the number of funded startups with at least one female co-founder declined from 17% in 2018 to 12% in 2019. And in terms of funding amount, this number is in last single digits. So I think it's important to have active conversation about the startup ecosystem's inclusion and diversity balance, both in the funding teams and in the founding teams. And another interesting study that I came across, I think McKinsey did this in 2015, was to have a hypothetical scenario where if we were to bring gender parity in India, what could be its economic implications, what could be its contribution to GDP. And that number comes about to $0.7 trillion by 2025. And that is 16% of what it would have been as business as usual. So I think that's a powerful statistic. And beyond these numbers and statistics that we just talked about, I think this topic is incredibly close to me. Having been at an institute where the gender balance or the ratio is 1:20 or 1:10 in your classrooms, and then coming in industry prior to this in banking, where again, it's a male-dominated field. And right now in the startup ecosystem, I think throughout this discourse, I have found that gender parity and inclusion needs to be talked about actively. And it's not just one conversation. I think we need to repeatedly keep having this conversation actively. Once we solve one problem, I think there will be other issues that come up or other opportunities to unlock. And I think it's incredibly important. And I'm super happy we are having this conversation today.
No, thank you for bringing out the numbers here, right? Because we at our end have also been working on, reports regarding this, and there are two aspects to the whole startup ecosystem. If we look at it, one is, of course, the founders themselves, right? How many women founders actually go about starting their own journey? And just 2 days ago, we were having this conversation about it from the angle that why we don't see that many women founders or entrepreneurs, and the perception that is associated with most of the businesses that are started by them, right? So that's one side of things. And the second side is that how many are believers in those women entrepreneurs if ever they do decide to venture out. So already the funnel is very less when it comes to women starting an entrepreneurial journey. And then the second part is, even if you do start the journey, by the time you reach, either you decide to build a self-sustainable business, but um, I have known this that if you call yourself a startup and an entrepreneur and you are not running in the funding race, then you're not a serious entrepreneur. Then you're running a lifestyle business, right? That you're not competitive enough. You do not want to scale. You're not really looking at becoming that market leader and various other stigmas associated with it. So we are looking at both the numbers, and I think it was easier to look at the gender ratio in the VC firms, right? So even the top 20 VC firms, if I have to see for India right now, and I'm just giving like tip of the iceberg here, right? Not even 10% are part of, not even 10% women constitute as part of the investment team or the decision makers or the ones who have started them, right? So in effect, it's a chain effect problem, I would say. I mean, what came first? We need more women to come in to increase this gender ratio, but by the time, as long as we don't have that gender ratio at the top, then we can't have more women entering. Um, what what exactly do you, what has been your perception? Because I'm sure that when you decided to be to be part of the career that you're part of, did these numbers appear to you also, and how are you perceiving them?
Well, certainly, I think the statistic you pointed out about India in specific, that there are not enough women in investment teams. I think there's no denying the fact that there aren't enough women. And it's not just India, I think globally also. And TechCrunch did this study of some 100 VCs globally, and they pointed out that, okay, which are the top 100 venture capital firms on the basis of their investments, longevity, fund size. And they realized that, okay, 38% of them had a female investing partner, and these are the top 100 firms. And now if they extend this list to the top about 2,300 VC and micro VC funds, this number is only 8% of funds who have a full-time investing partner who is a woman. So I think this disparity itself points out that there is merit in having women on board. It is an indicating factor that having a female investing partner might have been the fact that what led these, or one of the contributing factors that led these firms to be the top 100 VC firms globally. And this is just one statistic. I think there are enough such indicating factors and studies done to highlight the financial upside of having a gender balanced team, a more diverse team, especially at the early stage. And coming to my experience, I think there have been a couple of experiences that I have come across in the career path that I chose, and in a short period of time that I have been in this industry. Well, one of the things that has concerned me is that in a lot of Indian VC firms, especially, there are women who are, let's say, in the investor relations team, or there are enough women who are in the product team or the finance team, but not so much in the investments team. And while it is great that there are such women in other functions in an organization, and at an organization you are creating a good firm, but that is not a proxy for not having women partners on board, right? And it is incredibly important to have a seat at the decision-making table where you are voting whether a startup goes ahead in an IC or not, right? So having, and I think a lot of firms would have to take a look at, let's say, in their weekly meetings and see around the table how many women do they have actually on the table, right? Besides the allied teams. And the second experience that I have come across and heard from peers mostly is that when talked about gender balance, they tend to speak about, okay, while it's great to have diversity, but we wouldn't compromise on merit. Well, it amuses me that every time we're thinking about diversity, why do we have to, why does our first thought jump on compromising merit? Right? It has to be that you are strengthening your board. You are strengthening the point of view that you are bringing in the team. So the first thought about gender balance and creating a more inclusive culture has to be that it is creating something that you can be proud of. You can create a more inclusive, and bringing in more points of view on the table is only going to give you more opportunities to invest and scale and avoid some of the mistakes or some of the blind spots that you wouldn't have seen had it not been for a different perspective on the table, right?
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, I remember our conversation, on the side when we were connecting for this, and we were looking at this whole reason why companies or any organization, for that matter, right, should be looking at diversity. Another limitation that they look at is they believe that the table and the number of seats are limited. That some, if there has to be women who have to be brought in, that means some men have to be asked to get out of the room or leave the table. And that's one way of looking at it, instead of like just expanding the table. I mean, who made the table? It's not set in stone, and it's just about, instead of a 6-seater, now you say that okay, we are going to have a 10-seater or an 8-seater or a 12-seater. I don't know, you can make it any n number of seater tables, right? That's one. And why it makes sense is because your market is diverse. your
Yeah.
your market is diverse, so having a more diverse perspective internally, making decisions. And that was a point that you only made, that if you're looking at capturing a diverse market, then you should be looking at building an internal diversity intelligence also. And that's something that gets completely missed out as well. So two very crucial points that get that usually are misunderstood. It's a myth that the table is limited, and second, that we can conquer a diverse market without having diversity internally. I just wanted to add that bit to this one. But I want to divide it a little bit from the problem aspect here, Triyansha. From your own journey, right? From you becoming part of the VC world, right? There's a certain criteria I'm sure that companies are looking for, VCs are looking for. How easy or difficult it is from all factors that we see, family, social, education, and every other possible external factor which is out there, for somebody to reach where you were sitting, across the interview table, or let's say as an applicant. How, because that's also the gender gap, right? That's the whole pipeline that needs fixing. How was that? How would you describe that world or that journey to others?
I think one of the things that I would describe for anybody, and I know I'm too early in the stage in my career to give sage advice to anybody, but of course, from the limited experience I've had so far, is not to stop hustling. Is so, and as an example, within the VC world itself, while some would say that you need to come from an operating experience or you need to come from a startup experience, well, that is one myth that is certainly out there, where you can have good ideas about startups, you can have strong understanding of business models, excuse me, without necessarily having coming from a VC, prior VC experience or a prior starting up experience itself for that matter, right? Excuse me, so sorry. So these days, anyone coughs, I know the thought goes some other direction.
Just about to ask you if you're okay, but yeah, you got it. You got it. You're okay.
Yeah, no, I am. So coming back to my experience itself, I think it's been, I wouldn't say, and it would be wrong for me to take the whole credit to myself that I came here on my own. I think it has been an incredible support system that I received every step of the way, whether I was looking from college to move to a banking role where it was certainly outside of what I had studied in college,
Mm-hmm.
or from banking role, again switching gears and moving to an early stage ecosystem, right? And throughout this, I think it has been important for me to speak to my mentors, to speak to people who are already in that career, or speak to such people who have been there, done that, right? So to summarize, if I were to put it as, I wouldn't say that it's difficult or it's easy, but I would certainly say that if you are willing to move into this career path, there is enough and more mentorship available for you to utilize, and there are people waiting out there to help you, because we certainly want more women and more like-minded folks in this ecosystem.
So absolutely. I mean, if somebody is looking for mentorship, one thing I will send them your way to
Absolutely.
understand. It's been proven already. I mean, the more women leaders and more women mentors that you have, it's actually one of a very proven way of fixing the gender gap in any industry. So thank you for putting this out, and thank you for offering your mentorship also. Until the time that that change happens, we do see a huge rise in women-led funds, Triyansha. And that, even though yes, there are ones women-led funds or women-focused funds, incubators, accelerators are out there, and they are being introduced because, to be very honest, it's very difficult to compete in the larger sense of the market here. Um, do you think that's a way for the solution to fix the whole gender or women, the binary gender gap that we have, by having more dedicated women-led funds and accelerator programs? Is that a solution which will work for sure?
No, of course, and I think it's a very interesting question. And the idea behind dedicated funds for women or funds which have all women partners on board, and they could be investing in India. You have both kinds, at least not in India, but I know in US for sure there are funds like that. And they are not based on the exclusionary concept,
Hmm.
but in order to create an effective support system for women, I think they are incredibly important. And a proxy for that, or an immediate way to understand that, would be you do have groups for your college alumni who
Right.
mentor you, who give you career advice, or who open doors for you, right? And that is a way to get immediately associated with a group that you have been part of, or you somehow relate with, and is able to relate with your problems in turn, and then help you out the way, right? And for me personally, like I said during my journey also, that if I don't have immediate role models within my firm, or within my immediate circle, as female role models specifically, then I would certainly tap into such professional networks from all walks of life, that who have been there, done that, and then tap into the mentorship that they have now created, right?
Hmm.
And specific example of funds investing in women startups. I think some of the US funds have done an incredible job in doing that, and identifying some white spaces which were so far not even recognized, or not even recognized as a white space or a pressing problem in some of the solutions that need to be talked about as a woman consumer. And I think it's incredibly important, and there is certainly a lot more that can be done in that direction, and I think we'll see exciting things from such dedicated spaces.
So that's definitely one way of looking at it, right? That we do need a dedicated space around it. But somewhere there's this being a devil's advocate here. There's also these conversations that I keep hearing, and once again from other women, fellow entrepreneurs, and other male entrepreneurs also, that now that you have a dedicated fund towards your gender, why don't you just apply there? Right? And but these are not the mainstream funds. These are, and there's also a life cycle, right? That every fund, there's a reason why we say this is one of the oldest or the biggest funds, and these are one of the most globally now fragmented and expanded funds, and various other reasons, right? So that life cycle maturity is also not there in this one. How does this work out then? Because it will take its own time. And also, there are very less women with that kind of wealth to actually build funds like this. So,
Yeah.
from a long term
So
perspective, does this really work?
I'll put my investor hat here for a moment back again, rather than sharing my personal journey. So, if I were to come across a great startup founded by a women entrepreneur, and let's say it's a solo entrepreneur and it's a woman entrepreneur.
Hmm.
If I truly believe in that idea, and I know and I'm able to understand that this is a wide space and this is a major problem being solved, then it would be hitting myself in the foot if I say that no, you should go to a dedicated space which is meant for you, right?
Right.
If I have to create great returns for my fund, then it's important for me to look at such non-obvious opportunities, or
Hmm.
such opportunities irrespective of the gender or the caste or any kind of these biases that would arise as a
Hmm.
human, right? So it's important for me to be aware of these cognitive biases and not give in to them in the investing role if I were to create strong returns for the fund, right? So I don't think in the long
You've
term, and these dedicated spaces would take away the importance of inclusion in mainstream funds.
you've got me smiling on the word biases, because that's my next question to you. Aren't investors biased because there's a stereotype profile of startup founders that we see, right? Majority, of course, is men, and stems
Yeah.
from the fact that they are more serious about going ahead with the idea and giving everything that they have to give, putting their family at the back seat and burning the midnight oil or the every other possible oil that is out there in the market. They will never be distracted by family duties. They are not going to get pregnant. So even if their wife is pregnant and they have a family which is building, they will, nothing can distract them. That's one. Second is somebody, I mean, I don't even get me started on the caste and the religion and all, because I believe most of the startup founders are Marwadis out there, at least the majority of them are out there. Then we have this whole IIT and IIM or Ivy League educational one. Are these not biases, or is this just a success formula which is there? Because we still don't know, right? And I may be biased when I am calling these biases, and I'm very much aware of it. Very much aware that what I'm saying may also be coming out of a bias, because right now I'm looking at a world, like many of my fellow practitioners, wherein we see that there is a clear divide, right? It's not an intentional bias, it's also about affinity. What formula has proven in the past, why not go with it, right? So isn't there an element of bias in the decision making at the VC ecosystem also? Is it not there? I mean,
No,
what
absolutely. I think the IIT-IM thing that's being talked about is a confirmation bias, or let's say, in other words, that it's a validation that you tend to look for, and that is not the right thing to do. Absolutely, I think the judgment should be on the merit of the startup, on the merit of the founder's hustle, the founder's drive, and anybody from an IM could be as driven or as not driven as anybody else out there, right? So coming from an IIT or an IIM is not a validation fact that you would look for anymore. But I think some of the success stories you do hear right now, which were initially funded, let's say 7, 8 years earlier, and are now emerging. certainly that is where you see that, okay, at that time, probably this had been the thought, and this is what you're hearing right now, right? Or some of the recent fundings also, I know you would jump there that, okay, recently also some of these fundings have come to light. But I think it's been so highly pointed out, I would say right now, that
Hmm.
people have become increasingly aware that this is not a judgment factor or an investing criteria, a no or go factor, so to say, right? And that being said, I think the biases of affinity or association with certain nooks and association with certain societies or certain kinds of people does exist, and that is why I think you don't actively see a lot of, let's say, people going out of their way to look at investment opportunities that are outside of their immediate circles, right? And that is why you have these events where people tend to attend. So what I'm coming to at is it's increasingly important for us to be aware of these biases and overcome them to continue backing winner companies. And it would be extremely sad for any fund to have left a unicorn or to have left a potential winner company out there just because the founder was not from IIT. I mean, that would be a really immature thinking to
Yeah.
say that
Yeah, and I
that's
think that
not a go or no go criteria.
yeah, and that's why I think we call them subconscious biases, right? I think the most of the time we don't even know that they have set in, because that would be really sad. Not just, I mean, if I just look at this checklist, the only thing that I qualify for is a banya, or not even banya, actually a marwadi. That's the only thing that I qualify for. But jokes apart, Triyansha, one other thing, right? Women follow other women, right? And while we know that biases and everything can fix it, bias addressal, recognition, and every other thing will be fixing it. But how do you see a world where there will be more women in the investment decision team? Do you believe that will change some part of how the picture is right now in the startup ecosystem, or the number of applicants? Another thing that we have heard from a lot of decision making individuals is that um, the pool that we get of applicants to apply for funds, there aren't that many women there, right? So once again, we can't tell them anything, because if there are not that many women applicants, when we talk to women, they have a different story, right? So seeing more women, is this going to have any positive impact in the startup ecosystem, especially from the VC's angle?
Right, right. So I think there are two parts to this question. One is, how do we have more women participating in the startup ecosystem, both at the when they are applying to, let's say, VC firms, and then does this affect the founders at the founder stage as well? So I'll address both the points. And I know that actively, at least in the last 1 or 2 years that I have been associated within the VC ecosystem, I have noticed that active efforts are being taken to ensure that when you are interviewing, there are enough number of women that are given opportunity to interview in the first place. So I know that, and this is a statistic that I got from my senior, who was in Chiratae prior to me, was when I was interviewing, I know that for every 3 male applicants, they interviewed 1 women applicant. And that is just a beginning of effort on this side. So a lot of firms are, I think, actively making efforts in ensuring that they have enough representation when it comes to providing the opportunity, and then take it from there. On the startup side, I think highlighting more and more of these success stories from founders who have started a company and scaled it will definitely encourage a lot of women to start up at much earlier stages in their career, because at the end of the day, starting up is a lot about taking the leap of faith in that direction, right? And of course, you would be able to better highlight that journey where you can do your market study, you can do your product market fit, and you can have n number of examples to say that, okay, this might work or this might not work. But at the end of the day, it is that gut feel to, and that leap of faith and courage to say, okay, I am taking that risk with everything that I have, right? So it's important for women to see that that is happening in their circles, that has been done, and there is enough support and mentorship when they take that leap of faith, right? And um, uh, I mean, it shouldn't be left, that it shouldn't be left to the circumstances you are provided with, that I don't have, let's say, a supportive circle immediately next to me. I think it's important to teach, especially younger women, that if you don't have your immediate support available, how do you enable that conversation such that if you can, then you can garner support. You can evoke understanding of what you're going through from your immediate family or your immediate friends, such that you gain that support and is not left to how and whatever anybody else thinks. You need to create that. So highlighting all of these stories of women who have been PCs or women who have been entrepreneurs is certainly going to help a lot of women out there. And I do hope that it does to anybody who's listening to this talk as well. And I'm excited for things that it leads to.
No, thank you for pointing that out. I'm sure a lot of them will benefit from it. And I know our time is almost up, but if it's okay with you, can I take 5 more minutes?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to plug in one more question. Triyansha, when we talk to a lot of women and also, especially the startup founders and look at the whole psychology, right? Because when we look at women in any profession, there's a lot of social and psychological baggage which exists there. Not being able to maybe speak with the same conviction about the idea that is there, not being able to network with the same drive that should be there to immediately build that network or connects. At the same time, waiting for the product to be built before you even start talking about it, whereas just not talking about the idea, even when it is in a production stage, right? There's this constant self doubt which exists that maybe it's not good enough, maybe it's not the right time, maybe I should wait for a little more, uh, maybe it will be rejected. This self doubt is constantly there. However, whenever these sessions, especially the women-led funds and their leaders, we have had conversations with. Every time these challenges, these doubts have been addressed, there's actually no stopping. But that's not a job that a VC will do for you, right? That's not something that can be taken on your or on any of the VC or incubators shoulder. But from your angle, when you are identifying portfolio companies and when you are talking to startup founders, what are the behavioral traits that you have seen different between a male founder and a female founder? Has there been any difference?
So I think few differences that I would talk about, and I somehow expected these differences to come up in some sense, because I have been on the other side of the table as well when I started out. So I think some of the differences have been that women would tend to have a lower ask in some cases in terms of what is their funding. Women would come with a lot more validation and proof points to be very sure of the idea that they are pitching. But this is not a generalization. This is probably observation from some of the startups that I've spoken to. So with the disclaimer that this is not a
Sure.
generalization in any way, right? And I think men would tend to come with, even if it is half baked or even if it is 25% done, I think the confidence that they would come up with and say that nahi ho jayega. Sorry for the slang out there, but no, it will be done. I will get there. That kind of conviction, I think, is one of the difference that stands out for me besides other things in the pitching strategy itself, right? And I know this interesting thing that this was happening in orchestra as well. So I think in Europe this thing started, and I'm not really sure, but I'll have to check on that. But where it started as in, so when there were auditions for musical, for how they play music, I think they made it uh,
Like,
behind a curtain so as to not reflect on what gender it is coming from, right? And I think there have been studies, or there have been some efforts, not in India at the moment, but I know in US VCs where they have been trying to make at least the first pitch, the first meeting, not
mm-hmm.
dependent on gender. And it's a very difficult thing to achieve because in VCs you would have a lot of the early stage funding driven by relationships, driven by your conviction on the founder, right? Um, so it needs to be actively talked about because of this reason, right? Because women wouldn't have that high rates or a high ask, or wouldn't pitch their idea until they are like 80% sure or 90% sure of what
Yeah.
they are coming with on the table. And that is why I think I personally try to be active in some of these support groups and some of the women VC networks where we actually talk about these things and mention that this is not right, or this it's great, and support one another, lift one another up, that okay, this is a great idea and you should run with it, right? And I think one last joke I would mention is that yeah, not exactly a joke, but one thing I've still observed in some startups, and that really bothers me, is that the pink washing of products. I am appalled that it still exists, where you would package the same product with a pink label or a pink paint and put it out there. So, and just to come back to what I do about it, I think I try to be an active voice out there and point out that this is not right. It's 21st century. Please don't.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for being that active voice, Triyansha, sharing your own journey, and being so absolutely honest and transparent about it. Because there are a lot many out there for them. The world is very unknown, and for recognizing the mentors that you got, and how this world is actually devoid of mentors for majority of them. uh, anyway, there are very few women who walk the path and enter the VC's world, and you have already reached there, and you have the intent to mentor other younger generation and other aspirants who want to be part of this, who want to learn, uh, who want to navigate through the whole startup world also, and understand what works, what doesn't work. All these learnings in such limited time. I'm actually pretty grateful. Thank you for taking out time and capturing everything that we wanted to capture in this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I think it was lovely sharing my journey and my observations with you. And I look forward to continuing to working with Unchatter in coming times as well.
Your time is precious, so we roped you in for half an hour, which we greedily extended to 40 minutes now. But we will reach out to you again and find that space in your calendar again to have
Absolutely.
as you know, deeper level conversation on this.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Triyansha. Take care. Stay safe. Take care,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye. Take care.